Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back for Beyond the Devastation, episode 17. And we are certainly glad today to have you. And let me just tone down my music here today. Just loud and proud. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Perez, and today we are honored to have this young lady. And I was told I was just going to read right from the script because it was so much easier. And today is episode 17. We're going to be talking about beyond being unwanted. And I think there's no one else better to tell this story than from this author, this preacher. And I love what they said about her. It says, Nona is a rare combination of preacher, business executive, author, and entrepreneur, all rolled into one. I added that part. But she is one of a kind. She and I have had an opportunity to meet. And I had really, it's all her fault. She wrote a book. And I fell in love with this book. And I'm actually going to give it a little plug here because I want people to. So this was the book, right? It was From Social Media to Social Ministry. So today on Beyond the Devastation, we have the one, the only, Nona, not Nora, Jones. Good afternoon, young lady.
Good afternoon. So great to spend some time with you. And I'm so sorry that my internet is having some issues right now. But I'm really glad to be here.
Oh, you don't know. We listen. I've been telling everybody that Nona, not Nora, was coming, and so once they figured out who that was, they said, "Oh, wait, yeah, we want to see this." And the most important thing is that they can hear you. So that's really the most important thing. But you know, folks, this is a treat for me because I've seen this young lady from a distance and now get to see her kind of up close in person, virtually. But she is an anointed vessel of God, first and foremost, right? She is a mom. She is a wife. She is a preacher. She is a businesswoman. She's an author. She's a speaker. She's in construction now. Let's add that another title to her all the other things she's got on. But I really, what I appreciate about her is her humility. And you know what? And that to me really stands out. And Nona, I tell you, you've been so gracious with your time with me, and I appreciate it. But what I wanted to talk about today is if first of all, let me do this, because if you want to find out more about Nona, you can go to www.nonajones.com. Yes, I am plugging your stuff, no problem. And but you can see the story that she's written. Plus, her books are there. You've got the two books, Success from the Inside Out, and again, the book that really I looked at, and I thank God for my father-in-law that gave me the tip on this, From Social Media to Social Ministry. But this is when I thought about talking to you today, and I read the bio. No one can do it justice and let these words really kind of amplify through the hearts and the minds of people. But first, I'll let you do your little intro, and then let's come back and talk about, getting beyond the devastation of your childhood experiences. So tell the world who you are.
Oh man, well, that's such a loaded question, but
Yeah, I know.
I describe myself in just 4 words. I am a statistically improbable product of grace. When I think about my life and where I should be, statistically, I should be either in jail or dead. I should be on welfare with multiple children from multiple men. The statistics really point to a very different picture of who I should be. But that's why I say I'm a statistically improbable product of grace. God's grace really has manifested in my life. So the fact that I am a wife and a mother, my husband and I are celebrating 18 years of marriage this year. I got married 1 month out
Congratulations.
of
That's
college.
awesome.
Thank you. You know, having not seen a healthy family and yet having a healthy family, a family where my husband and I deeply love each other, our sons, we love our sons love us. Like it just shows the redemption power of God. And so all the work that I get to do in the technology sector and of course in the church, it's just a blessing. It just is a blessing. And so, yeah, that's who I am, a statistically improbable product of grace.
Yeah, for me to repeat that now would be I would just I'm going to mess it up. But statistically, you know, you're right, especially for women of color. You're absolutely right. You could have been a lot of places, but where you stand today is nothing but the grace of God. That's certainly impossible. I've seen God do some crazy things lately, and to see where he's brought everybody out. And it's funny because I'm doing a series this month on talking about Mission Impossible and
Mm.
taking the I am out and just seeing what the possibilities of God are. So thank you so much for confirmation. But I think you bring up, it's not on the questions we sent, but I think you bring up something that's really important. You didn't see the family in the functionality because it was dysfunction, which you'll share. But to
Mhm.
have what you have
Mhm.
is nothing but statistically
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
because you should have been the other way.
Mhm.
So that really leads into this question: is that how, you know, talking about the devastation that you faced as a child? Because
Mhm.
you're right. From what I've read and what I know in talking to psychologists and psychiatrists, you shouldn't be where you are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And I actually think that is a blessing. It's funny. I just preached this past weekend at a church up in New York, actually where you are. I just preached this past weekend about how, you know, as I reflect on it, I see the blessing in having not grown up in a Christian home because when the abuse was happening, I mean, I tried to end my life twice by the age of 11 because of sexual abuse, physical, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse. It was at the hands of my mother's boyfriend. My father passed away when I was shortly before my second birthday. He wanted to be a father so bad, but he was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. And so my mother essentially raised me in a home with her live-in boyfriend who was abusive to me and didn't know anything about church, Jesus, God, Bible, none of that. But I thank God because in retrospect, when I was 11 years old, right after my second suicide attempt, a classmate in the sixth grade invited me to church. And I had never been to church before. I didn't know what church was. I thought we were going to go over her house and play a game called church. I didn't know what it was.
Wow.
But walking in the doors of the church, I remember people smiling at me and reaching out to hug me and welcome me. And they were so loving and kind. And I felt like they genuinely wanted me there. And that was the first time in my life that I actually felt wanted, where I felt like my presence was desired as opposed to tolerated. And so because of that, you know, at the age of 11, I really started to lean into understanding more about God. I had never heard the gospel before, but the youth pastor presented it. And I was so moved by it. And I was really curious. And so I was reading the Bible on my own and developed a prayer life on my own. And at the age of 12, I accepted Jesus as Lord of my life. And I was, you know, in this household with people who were not believers. If I was going to church, it was because somebody was picking me up. I would arrange my own transportation. It wasn't like my mother was going with me. And so I thank God for that because I realized that that was such an inflection point. Whereas other people, and this is part of the reason why when I see people going down what we call the wrong path, I always say, except for the grace of God, there go I. So I don't judge them. My heart goes out to them because I see myself in them. But it was that inflection point where my classmate invited me to church that ultimately changed the trajectory of my life because I could have easily had a classmate invite me to join a gang, or invite me to, become in a sexual relationship or something like that. And that did not happen. And so I thank God that the grace of God met me at such a vulnerable point. And so, yeah, like I just see the hand of God on my life and on my childhood and how he truly shaped me. And I'm just grateful.
There's a lot there, but we don't have all this time because what I'm looking at, think 12 years old
Mhm.
when all of the thing you tied, I heard this from TD Jakes, and he said that when people look to commit suicide, the devil tries to steal their future.
Sure.
And you think about it, your future was twice trying to be stolen, but here you are by the grace of God
That is,
and telling a story that only you can tell. And how it, not only that, but it reflects, not only that, but it, not reflects is the wrong word, but it talks to so many people, whether male or female, young or old, because I think there's a lot of stories that haven't been told because of the shame of what happened, who did it, when it happened. But here you are sharing your life story, to hopefully, what I'm hoping for is that people realize there is something beyond the devastation of what
mhm.
happened. Um, and when I think about what happened to you at 12, you said that you were licensed to preach in your teens. You were born, you were in Florida. You were already doing the circuit in Florida, so you're already practicing what you need. You're already practicing and in walking in your ministry. Think about at a young age, but it led to you to do more, right? I mean, you got out of high school and you went to got your degree, right? Um, so how did those experiences from that teenage time to the time that you matriculated through school, how did they mold your who you are today? How did those experiences, I said, impact your professional and ministry life?
Well, I will say initially, I didn't realize the impact that trauma has on you. Like I thought that it was one of those things where, oh well, it happened in the past. I'm over it. I love the Lord and I'm saved, and so I'm healed and I'm delivered and I'm set free. Um, that's not necessarily how it goes, and I want to say that explicitly because I think sometimes we are disappointed in the fact that we're not over it. And what I had to learn is that there is no over it. There is simply learning to live with it and thrive through it. What happened to you, and there's nothing that's going to change it. But the Word of God does give us a roadmap, and it gives us an opportunity for freedom. At the same time, it's going to be a daily walk and a daily work. So that's what I had to learn. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I realized early in my career, at the point where, things were going really well. I was growing fast in executive level roles. And I was very young and I was getting, added to all these different awards, 40 under 40 this, 30 under 30 this. And technically, I should have felt like, wow, I've arrived, I'm successful. But there was this kind of just nagging emptiness on the inside of me. And mind you, this was like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years after the abuse ended, after I moved out of the house. But that pain was still there. And so I think two things I learned. I talk about this in my book, Success from the Inside Out. The first thing I learned is you cannot get victory over a defeat that you don't acknowledge. So if you say, well, I'm over it, it happened in the past, I've moved on, and you haven't actually dealt with it, chances are you are still defeated. You are also just delusional because now you're telling yourself, I'm over something when you are not over it yet. You've just simply tried to move on. But the second thing I learned, and this is related to the first, is that we can only get victory over the pain that we forgive. And this is hard. This is hard
Mm.
because many times what we want is we want a person to say that they're sorry for what they did to us. But if you think about it, there's really no power in an apology. Like an apology in and of itself has no power. The only thing that has power is the forgiveness that we give to the other person so that we can free our past. We can free our past from the power it has over our future. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that. So in my career, there were times when, I would use a role as just like a stepping stone. I would see people as just means to an end because I was trying to derive a sense of worth and a sense of value out of that position because my mother told me she didn't want me. And so I was carrying that throughout my life, throughout my young adulthood into adulthood. And it was affecting the way that I saw myself and the way I saw the people around me. And so, just number one, acknowledging that there is a place of defeat in my life where I feel hurt. And then number two, being willing to harness the power of forgiveness and extend it to people who may not even be sorry, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. And so that's part of what the work that I had to do, for sure.
If you've never done it, I have, and that's a monumental task. One, to acknowledge, B, to forgive, right? And if you haven't done it, I'm gonna, hit the pause button. I think this is a great time to acknowledge that you've got hurt, and if you need, more importantly than anything else, that's the hardest thing to do. Yeah. Two, forgive. I know what that is because I had to do it myself. Similar to your situation, I remember it was September, it was 2019. My son came to me because I'd gone through a divorce, and my son came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, I forgive you for everything that happened." Man, it unleashed a conversation that we've never had before. And the forgiving power of God just worked in that situation. It's a really powerful story that you shared because it's acknowledgement and then forgiveness. So you had to forgive your mom.
Yeah. Had to.
You had to forgive the person that abused you.
Had to. Yeah. And I think that was one of the most important acknowledgments I had to make, because I had thought that I had forgiven them. Like I had thought, years have passed, I'm over it. But what I realized was whenever I thought about my mom and whenever I thought about him, there was a visceral reaction that I had. Like I felt it in my heart and in my body. And so I went to the Lord for a long time. I was like, God, I really want to forgive because I don't want to feel this way. Like I don't want to have even a part of my heart be controlled by bitterness. Like I don't want that. And so it took some time. And what I really had to do is I had to be intentional about calling out as much of the offense as I could in great detail. And I will tell you, writing my book, Success from the Inside Out, it was cathartic. Like it really helped me because I had to write down some things and remember some things and pray over some things and forgive some things. So much to the point now where my mother and I, like, we're not in relationship, not because of what happened in the past, but really because I think my mom, she has some mental health challenges, and frankly, she's unrepentant for what happened in the past. And so because of that, I've had to break fellowship for my own health and well-being and my family's health and well-being. But I harbor no ill will towards her whatsoever. There have been several instances where she's fallen into financial challenges or she needed something, and we've taken care of it, and we've taken care of it whether she knew or not. Because I truly wish the best for her. I just know that being in relationship with her is not healthy.
And some people have to realize, look, I think you can do the forgiveness, you can acknowledge and forgive, but some relationships can still be toxic.
Absolutely.
And you don't need, once you're going through the healing process, the last thing you need is for somebody to continue to pour salt on the wound or open the wound and reinfect it.
Yeah.
Because those emotions, even though you've forgiven, as you said, it takes time for the mind and the body to get that. And God can do it. Yes, he can. Yeah. But you're still a human being that's got to deal with this. Sometimes separation is a good thing.
Yes.
And it gives everybody a chance to really, really heal. And you know, and in your situation, mom was still here. There are situations where the person has gone on,
Yeah.
and all you can do there is, as people have told me, write the letter. And just like you did, you wrote a book.
Yeah.
But some people, if you want to write the book, great, but write the letter and
Mhm.
get it out of your system
Yeah.
and clean, as they say, do that cleanse, from all of that hurt.
Mhm.
So it allows you to be that person that you've always wanted to be. And, I think as I'm listening to you, I think I go back to what you said in the beginning, how you were able to build a foundation on a family without having one to see from the
Mhm.
beginning.
Mhm.
That is a major undertaking.
Well,
So,
I will tell you though, like for me, it was simply a function of intention. And I've heard people say things like you can't be what you've never seen. I don't know that I agree with that. I think you can be what you intend in your heart. And so
mm,
in my mind, no, I've never seen a functional family. I've never seen a wife. I've never seen any of that. But I want to be a good wife and I want to be a good mother and I want my family to be healthy. And so because of that, I'm very aware of when I show up not in my best self. I'm very aware when I come at my husband in a disrespectful way because that's how my mother came against her boyfriend. And I saw that. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of when I talk to my boys in a way that may be demeaning or somehow degrading. And I'm aware of that so that I can go to them and I can say, listen, I was wrong for that. That is not who you are. And I ask your forgiveness for even saying those words and allowing my anger to push me to that place. That would never happen in my childhood, ever. I've never seen that happen. But that's because the intention that's in my heart is I want to build something that I've never seen and I've never had. And I'm not going to let that somehow be the limiter. And I think sometimes we use that as an excuse. Like, well, I've had my husband and I, we counsel married couples, and we have people say things like, well, my dad, he was a philanderer, and so that's all I know. And I'm like, yeah, but did you like that? Like, is that something you liked? Is to know that your mother was home crying because of what your father did? Well, no, but that's all I saw. No, that's what you chose. Own it. Like, own, this is what I chose. Out of the options, there was an option to be faithful and there was an option not to. I chose not to. And we can't keep blaming what we saw as because we knew it was wrong. We didn't like it, right? So I think that's what it was is I had to realize, look, what do I intend for my family? And that's part of the reason why unfortunately I can't be in fellowship with my mom because relationships are two halves of the same coin. There's the forgiveness side, which matters so much when there is a relational rift and there's an offense. There's also repentance. You got to have repentance. So if a person is unrepentant, I can forgive all day long, but we can't reconcile because that relationship requires both.
I hope everybody's taking notes. You might have to rewind, go back to what she said, take it down, and then fast forward to catch up to where she is, because that's a lot of work. But that's a lot of self, you're talking about you, the intentionality of wanting to be better
Yeah.
and the intentionality of wanting to grow and not be stuck, as they say, in where you were
Mm.
and not become a product of your environment.
Amen.
You chose not to be that product. You chose
Yeah.
not to be that child or be in that
Mhm.
headspace as whatever had happened to you. Um, but that takes, I mean, we know today that takes a lot of coaching for some people. That takes a lot of mentoring. And, as you were developing both, your business acumen and your ministry acumen, who were some of the people that really, say were influences in early on and even today?
Mm. Yeah, I like this question for two reasons. One, I had always wanted a mentor. I'd always wanted a spiritual parent. I had always wanted someone to take me under their wing. And that didn't happen. But what
Wow.
did happen is I had someone say something to me once that was such a blessing. They said to me, because I had wanted them to be my mentor. And they said to me, they said, listen, Nona, like, I really don't have the time. They said, but there are a lot of books at the bookstore that could probably help you with what it is that you're wanting mentorship on. And that advice was like worth its weight in gold, because what happened was I was no longer limited by what someone had time to do or not. I developed a voracious love of reading, to where I would go to the bookstore, and I still do this on a basis now. And I would buy, a new book every week. And I would just read about, different people's lives and, questions I had, whether it was business, ministry, whatever it was. And I would read, and I would just build up this kind of like intellectual horsepower that I don't know if I ever would have gotten waiting on somebody else. So even in ministry, like I had been praying for so long, like, Lord, I want a spiritual parent, and it just never happened. But the Lord has brought a few people in my life over the last few years who have stepped into that role. And it wasn't even something I asked them to do. It's just something that they did. I got some feedback from someone once, which was actually really interesting, because they were trying to get me to run for office. They wanted me to run for like school board or state representative or something. And while we were having this conversation, I had mentioned to them, I said, I've never had a mentor before. And they said, well, Nona, you seem so self-confident and self-assured. Like I didn't even think that you needed or wanted one. And so I realized then that sometimes people don't reach out to you because you look like you got it covered. And I had to take a step back and realize, man, maybe I need to be a little bit more vulnerable. And so I think in doing that, I've had a few people that have kind of stepped into that space. But, for years, I didn't have anybody. It was literally me, prayer, and books, trying to work through some things. I didn't have a therapist. I didn't have any of that. But I had a pastor, but I didn't really have the type of relationship with them that I would have gone and talked about my things with them. And so I say that to say this. If you find yourself in a situation where you're like, man, I really wish I had a mentor, but it's not working out, don't let that limit you. Head over to your local bookstore, head over to, an online bookstore, and find resources there. Because there are people who have written some really powerful books that can help answer some questions that you have that you need assistance on.
There's a whole list. I've used Maxwell in my professional career.
For sure.
Just because he spoke to a lot of things that in my professional career that really was I was able to adapt. Never met him, but I didn't have to. I had his book.
Yep.
And sometimes, trust me, it's a whole lot cheaper. Whoo, baby,
Yeah.
trying to one-on-one with John Maxwell. I think I would have been broke, but I could read his book, and it gives me those insights. So I think that's a valuable point. I want to take the last couple minutes with this. As I was talking to Nona in sort of the quasi green room, the one thing that really stood out to me on her bio was this word. It's called unwanted. And I understand it. It resonated with me. And it's a powerful word.
Mm-hmm.
And, Nona, I want you to take as much time as you need, because I think people need to hear it. You've got it on your website. Unwanted. It's you literally can't miss it. But what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, my mother told me on multiple occasions that she never wanted to have children in general, and she didn't want to have me in particular. She told me on multiple occasions that she wished I had never been born, that she should have aborted me. That just all of this that was it was very clear that my presence was not appreciated. And so I carried that into life, because I think, the words that parents speak over their children are really shaping their identity. They're shaping their understanding of who they are, because that's the most important voice that a child has in their life. And so I think hearing that, it really fractured my identity, and it made me feel that my entire being in this earth was somehow a burden. It was a burden to her. It was a burden to other people. And that's part of the reason why, like, even to this day, people often marvel at how I can do so many things. So I can do graphic design. I can code websites. I can play the keyboard by ear. I can write music. I, of course, do the work I do in technology. I can speak. I can do all these things. If I need to do motion graphics, I can do all that. And people are like, well, how can you do all these things? The reason part of it is because the idea of being a burden has made it such that I often don't ask for help. And it's not because I don't want the help, it's because asking for help reinforces being a burden. And so internalizing that, what that did is it made me super resourceful, because it was like, well, I can't ask that person for help because then I'll be a burden on them because my mother said I was a burden. So I say all that to say that really, really shaped the way that I saw myself for many, many years. And when I say many years, I mean even up until a few years ago. And it's something I deal with on a daily basis. This asking for help, or this idea that, oh well, if I ask someone for something that and they don't do it, then that's somehow a rejection of me. And so it goes back though again to the voice that my mother spoke over me. And so that is another area of ground that I pray over, that I ask God to help me reclaim. And I'm actually releasing a third book this coming September 2022. It's called Killing Comparison. And the reason I wrote the book is because that is why I have struggled with insecurity. Because insecurity, many people think you're insecure if you have like a big ego, and that's not true. Insecurity is really fundamentally a question of what is your identity secured to? Is your identity secured to a stable foundation, or is it secured to an unstable foundation? Well, what's unstable? People's approval, your job title, your marital status, your financial status, things that fluctuate. But what does not change, stable foundation, of course, is who God says that you are, what God has called you to do, your purpose in this world. And so if your identity is secured to that, you won't be insecure because it's secure. So I had to realize that my identity was truly secured to approval because my mother withheld it. And so I had to perform in order to get the approval that I so desperately wanted, which ended up being unstable. And so I've gone through that process. God has been so gracious to give me insight and wisdom on how to get victory over that. But it all started with this idea of being unwanted. And if you're unwanted, then what's your purpose in the world? And do you even have a purpose in the world? But there's something we all know. I think it's Jeremiah 1:8, where God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And because of that, there's this whole pro-life movement, right? Where it's like, we got to save the unborn babies. But if you read that verse, it's actually saying something even deeper than what we think, because we think life begins at conception. God said, before I formed you in your mother's womb. In other words, before conception, I knew you and I had called you. So we have purpose on our life before the egg and sperm even meet. And that to me is what has given me such a sense of validation, not what people think, not people's approval, but the fact that before my mother and father even came together and conceived,
even thought about it,
God had already assigned purpose to my life.
So, yeah. And I think for me, I just wanted people to understand that label of being unwanted can be such a heavy weight. It could really take you to a suicide. It can take you to depression. It can give anxiety. You name every psychological thing. That unwanted, the child who's left for foster care, the child who's left in an adoption, all of those, that unwantedness is becomes a part of who they are, until they get to this point of saying, oh, wait a minute, somebody does want me. I am wanted. But it takes some time for that to develop. And that, to me, as I read it, and I wanted you to explain it, because people can get to a point of being wanted. And we know that there's the greatest person in the world that wants everybody. And that's Christ himself, right? I mean, and there we could find that sense of belonging, like you did when you were 12. You walked into a church and everybody said, "Hey, how are you?" And that changed your life. And you think about the times you wanted to take it, but yet God had purpose. And before your parents came together, you had purpose. It was already pre-designed, predestined that you'd be sitting where you're sitting. And Nona, I can't thank you enough for letting the world hear your story, because people can get beyond the devastation. And I thank God for the title of this, because that's why I wanted people to share. How did you get beyond it? It took a long time, but you were able to get forgiveness. You and your mom, you were able to get that situation. The unwanted, you were able to change that label. You were able to succeed in business and in ministry and have a beautiful family. And if you haven't seen them, go ahead and check them out. They're cool. But to get all of that, I will say this for everybody before she leaves. It took a lot of work, though. The Nona you see today was whoop, snap your fingers and she's here. This took a lot of work for her to get here. And so if you think that it happened overnight, no. And she'll be the first one to tell you, but I really appreciate you, young lady. I can say that because I turned 58 a couple weeks ago, so I know you're nowhere near that. So stay young. And I can't thank you enough for your story. I can't thank you enough for your time. And before we go, let's do this. Give everybody the name of your ministry there.
Our church is called Open Door Ministries here in Gainesville, Florida.
Gainesville,
and
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, it's in Gainesville, Florida. And my husband is a pastor. His father started the church in the mid-70s, but we've been in leadership now for about 6 years.
And so that adds another weight. Wow. Anyway, listen, she's got enough titles and she got enough hats. And there's one that I didn't mention, but also Nona happens to be the director of faith-based partnerships, correct? Is it now? It's Meta, correct? Mm-hmm. AKA Facebook. She also has that. Nona has not only her undergrad, but she's got her master's. I saw that you took some courses at Harvard on negotiation. Whew. I wouldn't want to mess with her. She'd take you apart now. Look out. But thank you, young lady. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being on today. And again, I just pray God's blessing over your life. And I can't wait to see the 5th or the 6th or 7th book, the 8th book, whatever you want to write. Just go ahead and do it. You were predestined to do it. So thank you so much. Don't go. I'm going to drop you back in the green room. I just want to share a couple things before you go. Listen, this has been a great episode, guys. You want to share this with your family, friends, everybody, and make sure that you hear her story, because it is one that will change your life. So let's play out.